You're by I'm gonna say training, right? Because you were showing me some musical instruments here a minute ago. This isn't what you like went to school for and like set out in life to be your mission to be an EOS implementer and a business coach.
No. I mean, it is now.
Yeah, it's your mission now. But what was your first real job, if you will?
First real job. It's probably where all this stuff kind of came together. So how far do you want me to go back?
Oh, we'll stop.
So I'll keep this pretty light, and we can go there deep if you want to go. I had a pretty dysfunctional upbringing, as many of us do. And so I kind of really attached myself to music early.
Okay.
Because it was kind of like a thing I could do, kind of escape, played in bands. And so that was my first big passion, love. Was in bands, and I always kind of found myself as the leader of these bands. And so bands are just little teams, right?
Okay.
So I work with leadership teams now. Bands are not that much different. It's just a group of folks that you're trying to figure out what everybody's supposed to do. But I love music, and that was my first passion. So did that, and then I felt like I really needed to. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I felt like I needed to get out of town and do something different. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. We could talk about it if you wanted to. So I came down here in 2004 and went to Full Sail for audio engineering and music production. I pretty quickly realized I'm not really an engineering guy. So I was in this program and realized I'm more of a creative. But it led to my first real job, where I was the first employee at a venture capital backed music technology company.
Okay.
And the CEO was in Los Angeles, and her partner was in Orlando. And so it was the three of us, really. And then we had like a programming team in the UK and in Finland. So it was like this really cool marriage of music, and I got dropped right into this incredibly entrepreneurial startup. And so I'm like 20 years old, and getting to do stuff that I think most 20-year-olds just don't get to do. So I kind of led our whole testing of this software. So the software at the time, it's going to sound funny, it's called e-jamming. All right, everything had an E before it, right? E-jamming. And this was essentially Skype for musicians, right? That's how we used to say it. Now I use Skype or Zoom or whatever, but we used to say Skype for musicians. And it was so that musicians could connect over the internet in real time and try to play in real time. It didn't succeed because the technology infrastructure at the time, and even now, the internet infrastructure does not support enough of a real-time experience for musicians that you would need to be successful.
Okay.
But anyway, so I was the first employee, and it gave me this taste for kind of the entrepreneurial life, and I got to, we flew all over the world. I was like the face of the company, so I was this 20-year-old kid, didn't have the beard at the time, so I looked 9 years old. Like, beard comes off, I look 9. And I would present this to VC, to, acquirers, to big media outlets, do big presentations at big conferences. And so it was just kind of a pretty cool experience of being able to be a musician, but also start getting a taste of this kind of really entrepreneurial startup world. So that was my first real job.
Did you ever grow your hair out long? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah?
This is the short version. Yeah, man. High school, down here. By the time I was here, though, it was starting to shorten up. But of course, man.
Okay.
You're in bands,
I mean, I feel like that kind of VC-backed music industry, I feel like you kind of had to embrace a little bit of both of it, right? Like, you had the long hair, the kind of the hippie-ish, but you were also kind of like, hey, I'm the tech guy.
Yeah, and my role there was I just needed to be a competent communicator of our technology, and like I need to be believable as a real musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have like this underlying drive for things to be like in sync? Like things have to be running together?
Okay, I've never really thought about that, but yes.
Like it has to be on track or whatever the right, like, is there an underlying metronome to your life and rhythm?
Dude, that's an interesting question. I actually would think that's a great way of thinking about what kind of drives me is I like taking things that are out of sync and getting them in sync.
Okay.
That's kind of what I do for a living. Is
Yeah.
You take a team, a leadership team, things are not quite in sync, and we try to get them in sync so they can actually go where you want to go. And I think that's what you're doing with music is you're taking all this, what could be just random noise and trying to get it into something that is enjoyable to
And
listen to.
I have a feeling that a lot of the companies you work with, they're humming along. They're doing well. A lot of them are doing fantastic. But there's just something that's a little offbeat, and you're just finding those little pieces that are offbeat and trying to bring them into the master track or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That's basically your job.
Yeah, I have thought for a while, what is his name? Rick Rubin is a famous producer. And if you read about Rick Rubin, he is very light touch, right? He doesn't come in and just tell everybody, all these artists, what to do. He just kind of hangs back and waits for the right time to go, how about a little of this? I'm probably a little heavier handed, but I have for a while kind of been pretty clear that my role is kind of similar.
Yeah.
They're the band.
Yeah.
I'm not in this band, right? Rick Rubin is not in the band. He's the producer. But my job is to help, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that to get the band to perform a little better.
Yeah.
All right. And that's what every entrepreneurial company needs is a good, solid leadership team, which is the band.
Yeah.
At the top. And so, you get these little things that aren't quite working, and I help kind of get it to work, or you realize, what's not working is some of the people don't fit in the band, right? Pete Best was not the ultimate drummer. You had to go get Ringo Starr, right? So, it started with Pete Best. You had to go get Ringo.
You're like, no, we don't need a saxophone in this ensemble.
Did anybody ever think saxophone was a good idea in any band? Except for Springsteen?
But you've told me, too, that even part of your kind of your sales methodology is you're not a cold call, hunt you down. You're all right, you told me what some of these challenges you're having are. You ready to fix them? Nope. And then you wait, 9 months, and you'll be like, how's it going? And that's your method, is kind of that Rick Rubin style, just kind of sit back, watch, and...
Yeah, I think all this stuff is just leadership, right? And I think that you can't force people to do stuff they don't want to do. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to kind of figure out what the best way to get somebody to do something that they think they should do, and sometimes that's the time is now, and sometimes you just got to go, hey, it's not the right time. And so, I think you got to build relationships and stay in touch with people and make sure you're actually understanding what they're going through.
Yeah.
And so you got to slow things down to make sure you understand. I actually don't think sales and what I do, facilitating and coaching teams, is at all different. I think they're all one and the same, and they're just trying to understand what the actual issue is.
Interesting. Okay.
What is the actual issue? Not what is the issue presenting as, the symptoms, right? We're having cash flow issues or something like that. Well, that's not the issue.
Yeah.
It's never the issue. It's what's presenting itself, right? Let's dig to the front of or the bottom of the issue. And so I think leading, selling, they're all really the same thing. Is you're just trying to help somebody take where they are, and if they want to be here, can you help them get there? What are the steps you need to do to get them there?
And
I don't know if that answered your question, but
it did.
I kind of all see it as one activity. I don't even separate.
You don't separate the two silos of work. Okay. Now, before I guess I'll ask you first. Have you always seen yourself as an entrepreneur, or do you even see yourself as an entrepreneur?
No, I didn't grow up in a family that, that was something that was
People
a part
did.
of the identity.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I'm like, oh, I've always been a little different. Right?
Yeah.
So I grew up with, professors, teachers. Now, there's a part of what I do, which is teaching.
Yeah.
So there is a little nugget there. And then my dad was a general in the military, and then was a judge. So he was a lawyer. And there's some entrepreneurship in being, he's a politician, right? So he had to get elected. So you actually have to be entrepreneurial in a way. But no, I did not. That was not something that I thought much about. And I think it's just in the past few years where I'm like, really being around entrepreneurs more, where I was like, oh, these are my people.
Yeah.
So no, that was something that it kind of revealed itself over time.
You are probably one of the more regimented people I know, just from our conversations. Do you think some of that's from your dad's time as a judge in a military background?
If it is, it would be in our DNA because, I didn't spend my parents split and spent a little bit of halftime with dad, halftime with mom up until a point, and then I went and just lived with my mom. So it probably would not have been from exposure. It would have just been in the DNA.
Embedded in, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's not actually something I think I picked up a whole lot from him directly.
Okay. A lot of musicians in your family?
Grandmother.
Okay.
Great pianist.
Okay.
And her brother was like a world-renowned trombonist in jazz bands in New Orleans, right? So you can be world famous as a trombone player and really struggle in life,
yeah.
right? So, I mean, I never knew him. Apparently, he's like a really cool guy. But so I've got a little bit of that on my mom's side. On my dad's side, I don't know that there's any of it. I don't know of anybody with any type of musical. But my mom loves music, and so she steeped us in great music.
Yeah,
growing up.
So, were you the band leader when you put your band together?
I always fell into that role. It didn't necessarily start that way, but I would just kind of find my,
yeah,
somebody's got to fill the void.
Okay. And so before you launched kind of your venture here, the coaching, the EOS implementation, some of the other sales things you do, what did you do right before?
I ran a production company.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can give you so I was in that tech startup.
Yep.
By all accounts, extremely exciting what we're doing. Most of my friends are either never made it to college, or if they are, they're still in college, and they're doing that, and I'm doing this stuff all over the world, or I'm doing this crazy stuff. Probably the deeper version of that story is, at that time, I was kind of going through this, I was not a Christian growing up, and so I'm going through this whole experience of becoming a believer, and my whole life is kind of changing. So that's the probably more important undercurrent that's going on at that point. So I'm in this startup. My life has kind of gone through this kind of big spiritual conversion, and I had started to get involved at a church, and I felt the worship pastor left, and they reached out to me and were like, I think you're the guy. And I was like, that's fantastic. I do not think I'm the guy, right? So I was like, I don't think I'm the guy, so I appreciate it. And so I kind of just initially was like, no, I'm not turning this down for that. And that's not how it worked out, right? So over time, I really felt like I was called to do this. And so I left the tech startup and went into ministry for 10 years. So I was a worship pastor at a church. And so that's actually probably where, and I was always a little bit of a fish out of water there, because I am wired type A, a little more intense. So that environment was a little of an odd fit. And I kind of knew that it was probably not my long-term fit, but I did that for almost 10 years as worship pastor. And I learned two things in that experience, and that'll get us to the production company, but I'll tell you in a second, that have just greatly benefited me in the work that I do. The first is, we assembled, a pretty good group of talented musicians, some who had been professional, toured, won, multi-platinum records. So we had a stable of really good musicians. But I decided, as a part of our model, that I really wasn't going to pay much of these folks. So this is going to be volunteer, except for a few, just a couple anchor guys. But where I'm going with this is, I realized I had to figure out how to lead people that I had no stick, all carrot.
Yeah.
I mean, I can fire them from the volunteer band that they're in, but there's not. So that was a great lesson for me, which was I got to figure out how to motivate people to really put in work, do something that is, to do something at a high level as a team, to be challenged, to be coached, to be pressed. And at any point, they can just tell me to go take I. Right? So it was a really great, because now I lead these people, and where it's a strange relationship. When a client hires, they're hiring you to challenge them, right? And so you're in this, it's an odd dynamic, right? Because technically you work for them, but your job is to lead them. And so I learned, I think that I didn't know it then, but looking back on that, it was a tremendously good experience, because I really had to figure out, how do I get people motivated to do something that I think they need to do without having much of a stick. I don't have that control. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they weren't depending on that role for income or anything else. It was purely fun for them.
And I would get people in various other parts of the ministry who were like, and I try to say this with whatever degree of humility here, but who'd be like, I'm struggling to get my people to buy in. But it seems like you get all these people to buy in. Like, what are you doing? And I had to really think about it. I didn't really have an intentionality behind it. It was just kind of how I approach things. But I think my theory, and this is what I do with everybody, is I just expect a lot of people, and I expect that they would have expectations of themselves that are high. And so I just, wherever you were, we're going to have high expectations. Agreed? Right? So that's just our agreement. You know what I'm saying? And so there's no other path. And if you don't have those high expectations, it's just not going to be a good fit for you. So that was one thing that I think has helped me a lot in this work, where I mean, if I'm working with somebody that's on a leadership team, I can't fire that person. I can influence a leader to, hey, I think you need to move on from this person, but I can't fire them directly. Second thing is, you get in a ministry setting. Are we on track here? Is this good? Okay.
That's exactly right.
You do funerals, and you do these things that you going through people at, at their highest, but also at their lowest, and a deep empathy for people who are going through something difficult. And I think when I'm working with my teams, people have got other things going on in life, and I think an ability to not be thrown when somebody is emotional or struggling, or it's just like, all right, we can navigate this. And I think that those two things from that ministry experience really helped me a lot in my current work, because there's a time to be demanding and strong and challenging and pushing the team, and there's also a time to kind of sit back, put your hand on somebody's back and go, hey, we want to get through this. Do you know what I'm saying? And so that experience, and I'll be honest with you, I got through a period of that where I was like, why am I in this line of work? I thought I was maybe going to become a pastor, and it just felt like those doors closed. Like, that just wasn't the right path for me. I think this is the right path for me. And so I really struggled on the back end of my ministry experience of, like, I felt like I was just straight up on the wrong lane. I didn't know that there was a lot to glean from that experience. Like, I was kind of burnt out from it. And I look back on it now, and I'm like, oh man, this is huge. This has given me a lot. So anyway, I'm doing that. And so here's where some of the entrepreneurial bug just kicks in, because I loved that. But very early in my kind of faith journey, and I cannot explain it to this day, I just felt this connection to wanting to spend time in Africa. And I don't really understand it to this day, but early on, since like 2005, I went over there to East Africa for 3 weeks just by myself, and just kind of wanted to experience it. And so once I came on staff at this church doing worship pastor, we had this opportunity to start up this ministry nonprofit where we could essentially be the funding arm and set up this program to help orphans and vulnerable children create these small businesses, micro businesses. And it was just like this formless thing. And so there was a group of us, and I was like the tip of the spear on...
Naturally.
kind of just getting this thing going. So I traveled over there a lot, and it was originally called Panua, and it's called Inua now, and it's been going over 10 years and helped thousands of young people come out of extreme poverty. So the time I'm doing this kind of worship pastor thing, and I'm also kind of helping on the side kind of launch this enterprise to help young people who I think part of it is I just connected with their story, having some struggles as a kid, connected with that and wanted to help them. And so we're still, you actually look around my office, there's a big lion over your shoulder. There's a lot of little subtle Africa.
The map over there.
That's not that subtle. It's a big Africa map. Little touches. And so I keep it top of mind. And Laura and I, my wife, we are the kind of this primary investors in this school that's in a slum in Nairobi. And we've just kind of been doing this for like 10 years. It's a separate organization. And so that's a kind of a big piece of who we are as well. So I'm doing that. And when I'm helping launch this Panua, I hired a production company to create some content for us. And we need to tell the story. And I hired a guy named John Strong. We had been friends, but I wanted him to make some content, some videos for us. And anyway, we hit it off. He did some great work for us. And over time, we built this relationship. And towards the end of my ministry time, he was like, "Hey, man, I got this company, got a team, got employees, and we're a mess. And will you come run my company?" Right? And so I didn't immediately do that. I consulted with him for, I don't even really remember, 6-9 months, but then ultimately came on and took over running the production company. So I left the ministry gig, run the production company, and that's where I really kind of got into EOS. We used the tools. It was pretty messy, but we used the tools internally, and it really helped us get some form to what we were doing. And we had a cool little run together. We had a film, get picked up by Netflix, and we did some cool national commercial spots. And so it was a lot of fun. But I really fell in love with EOS, and that's where I decided, hey, I think this is my path. So I kind of started connecting the dots on, fundamentally leading bands as just being a coach. You're just kind of a coach.
Yeah.
Get the team to perform, and this whole kind of loving entrepreneurial stuff. And so I was like, hey, I can do that, put this entrepreneurial stuff together and build a coaching practice. And so that was 2018, and kind of just took all this stuff from my past and started really putting it into play with what I do now to help kind of second stage entrepreneurial companies. So not startups, not big, typically my clients are like 2 to 100 million in revenue, really get to the next stage. Right, really professionalize and get to the next level.
What would you say to those business owners or leaders who they feel like their entire staff is a bunch of volunteers? Where do they start? Because you said you set the standard, and collectively, hey, this is the standard we're going to be operating at.
And they're frustrated about that, you mean?
Yeah.
They view...
I thought I was doing really good at my job. I'm great at my job. And now this person's telling me that the standard's not what I'm doing. I see that and I hear that. I saw that in my own line of work. Saw it when I owned my own business. Right? We came in, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to do that. But you need that person because you think you need that person because they're performing or they're generating revenue.
So make sure I understand the question is that if you are the leader, mm-hmm. and you are now upping the standard.
Yep.
You're saying like we are now making a change, and you view your employees as volunteers, or you help me understand what you're saying.
So I'm the owner of this business, right? And it's time to level up. We need to take it to the next level. We've been coasting. We were on a slight decline. I feel like I'm managing a bunch of volunteers because people aren't as bought in as I'm trying to be, right? They always say, managing volunteers is like herding cats, right? Very, very difficult to do. So where do these business owners, where do these entrepreneurs start?
Yeah, I think I know where you're going. If you're all of a sudden wanting to up the standard, and then you look at your people and you're going, okay, well, they're not buying in. I think the instinct is to get frustrated with the people. And I think the reality is you've probably severely undercommunicated why we're doing this.
Yeah.
What's the story? What's the motivation? What's the ambition? Why are this all of a sudden? Why have the rules changed all of a sudden? The rules have been this way for 27 years, and in the last 6 months, the rules have changed.
Yeah.
That is not their problem. You're making it about them. That's a leadership issue. So I think step one has to be the leader has to kind of get. You got to go, and you probably want to go to some key people first, who you think can help be on the journey. And lay out what it is that you're seeing and why. This is why I want to up the standard. I feel like there's more here. There's more opportunity. And I think being humble about it is probably a really good place to start. I've not always known how to get us to perform to a higher level. I've always wanted us to, and now I'm seeing a path for us too. And so I want you to understand why it is that if we start seeing some changes and higher expectations, why that is, right? And so I think there's more leadership work, and that is work. And a lot of entrepreneur, founder folks, that's not their initial go-to. They are action people. Take an idea, get it to action, go get a sale, move. And this can be some slower work. This is investment work. So I think that's the first place to start, is helping people understand what is motivating you. And then you got to do the other work of, seriously, key people, making sure you understand what motivates them. Mm-hmm. Why do you do what you do, right? So a lot of this is just, you got to start kind of investing in some of your people. If you have a really large team, then we got to figure out who are the key people we need to get on board so that they can then hopefully buy into what you're trying to do. And then they can kind of get everybody else on board. I would say that if that is just fundamentally not a great skill set, then we got to go figure out who can we get around you that can help take your idea and translate that to the rest of the company to get the rest of the company on board.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because some of the folks I work with are probably just never going to be very good at articulating that and empathetically trying to do that work. And so we might need to get, and the term we use is integrator, right? So if you're a visionary and you don't know how to get the team to get all aligned, then we probably need to get some folks around you that can help the team get aligned. Now, we then may have to come to a serious point, and this happens too, where let's say you've done that and they like the old way, then we're going to have to confront that.
Yeah.
Right? And the difficult part of everything we do is the folks, and could be wonderful folks, who got us here may just not be the right folks, or at least in the current roles that they're in, to get us to the next phase. But to the short answer to your question, is a long answer. The short answer to your question is, I think that leader has to look inside internally and go, if they're not getting it, have I communicated why it is that all of a sudden I want to say, here are the rules, here are the new rules.
Okay. Yeah.
You can push back. What do you
No,
think?
I think that's great. I saw
You see it
this
differently?
I saw this in myself when we took over our shop, and I came in first few weeks. We set the new standard, and we weren't good at dealing with that confrontation. And the people who were very welcome to are very, they were like, okay, cool, yeah, this is the new standard. And then over the course of a few weeks, reverted back into what they were most comfortable in.
Yep.
And it took us pulling them up month after month, meeting after meeting, to the new standard again. And it became frustrating and wore us down, right? I think that, there's a bunch of reasons there, and this episode is not about me. So
We could make it about you. Want to start turning the table?
turn it around, switch chairs real quick.
I don't get interviewed very often. I do a lot of interviewing.
How does it feel to be on the other side of the table?
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's different though.
I would love to ask you this question before we shift into kind of the main question I have for you. But how much do you feel like these companies you work with or businesses that you've been a part of, how much of it is right place, right time, luck, versus these people are just the Elon Musk of their industry, and they just, everything they touch turns to gold? You think is that a 90% luck? Is it 50-50?
It's definitely partially. and I don't know if luck is the right word. You could probably dig a little deeper, but let's stick with luck. Yeah, I think, man, I think that if you think that all of your success, there's not some luck baked in, I mean, fine, you can do that. I think there's some element of how did you grow up? What were you exposed to? I think it's different for everybody. You know, I've got a couple second generation or third generation where there was already something established, and they've done a great job of capitalizing on something that was already established. So, yeah, I hope they recognize how fortunate they are. They had something to work with. And then there's some who, who grew up dirt poor and didn't have anything and really just scrapped and scraped. And so it's probably a little different for everybody. But I think at the end of the day, none of us made ourselves. We literally were made by somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you can't figure anything else out to go, I didn't do it all myself, you did not birth yourself. Yeah. Right? You are here as some type of a gift. Yep. And so I think even if that's all you can find, you could go, hey, I had an opportunity to be at this time. I got this information, I was exposed to this, and then I applied the work, put the work in, and here we are.
Okay.
So I think there's got to be some portion of it that's
what was the
happenstance?
What was the lucky moment where you stepped back and you said, all right, it's time to bet on myself, right? Because you had the job with the VC-backed company, you moved into ministry work, right, where you led a team. So someone else is paying you along these steps. And eventually you are the person leading the production company, right? So you've elevated yourself to that top spot, but the company's still paying you, right? There was something that was built there before you. At what point did you go, all right, it's time to bet on John King. It's time to bet on myself, and you launch this venture?
Yeah, I mean, we got to the point where the vision for what we were trying to do with the production company, we were just not on the same page, and it was just not. We weren't going to get on the same page, and so I knew that wasn't the right place to be. Mm-hmm. So we stepped back, and we had been financially smart enough I had a little bit of time, not forever, but a little time, to figure it out. And, I did some one-off, my first income after I left the production company was the production company hired me back as a consultant on a documentary that we were working on, right? So I immediately, I'm now on my own, but I'm immediately kind of right back in that world. I think it's pretty, I don't know, 6 months, 5 months after officially kind of moving on, I had a pretty good idea. I think I could go an employment path, but I just kept coming back to, I really want to do my own thing. And I think underneath the hood, I've always wanted to do my own thing. I was never a great employee. I was a bad employee, but I probably wasn't always the easiest to deal with.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think I was a team player, but you always knew where I stood. My opinions were always going to be very well known. And so that's where we are, right? I've always been independent kind of minded, and I think at the end of the day, I think it was just this thing that was inevitable that, I think I just wanted freedom, as much freedom as possible to kind of dictate what the outcome was going to be, career-wise, family-wise. But I would say it was my wife who finally just said, hey, dude, would you just do this and stop talking about it? Which is probably pretty common, right?
Yeah.
Not a huge shocker. We were sitting around the table, actually not terribly different than this. She was sitting here. I was sitting where you are. Dinner table, and she was like, just do it. We just got to do it, right? And she was pregnant with our first, she's a nurse, so we didn't have, massive income to rely on. And so that was that was when we decided to kind of go for it. This is 2018. And man, it was lean, dude. It was friggin' lean. I made like $18,000 in 2018. I think I made like $35,000 in 2019. So it was lean for a couple of years, figuring out the mechanics of knowing that I would be good at the work, but for the first time being the person who was by themselves having to go develop and close all the work. I'd been in the selling process before, but not the single person relying on driving all the revenue. So that was quite a journey to kind of figure that out. And, we had some highs and lows for sure in that journey. But by about 2020, late 2020, things started to
Up and to the right.
kick up. Yep.
So I've read a ton, as you know, and you read about some of these entrepreneurs, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna bet on myself, and they go out day one, and they're just doing everything, and they burn themselves out. So that day across from the table from your wife, and the next morning, were you like a totally different person, or were you just the same person reoriented?
I don't know.
I think about those guys who say they're going to lose a bunch of weight, and so the next morning they wake up at 4:30 and they go run 5 miles, and then they can't walk for 2 weeks, right? And so they did too much too fast. So were you out the gates just hunting like crazy, or was it more of a steady process of building that new identity, if it really was even a new identity?
I think the energy was there. I just didn't know the mechanics. I didn't know who exactly I should talk to. And so I'm talking to all kinds of folks, and that over time you realize, these aren't the right people to talk to. These are not really prospects, or these aren't the right connectors. So I didn't really have a network.
Okay.
And in this work, you need a network where people see you as this guy who can help a group of people move forward in their business. And I did not have that. And I think I thought I had more of that when I started.
Okay.
Because I knew people in the business entrepreneurial community, but they did not view me that way. So I had been niched into a different area.
Yeah, you were the production guy.
I was either the production guy or I was the ministry guy. Okay, and it was actually the ministry guy that was probably harder. The production guy, we navigate that. That was a harder leap for people to go. I'm trying to figure out how to get from this to that. So I had all these. I thought those were going to be my people, and that was humbling experience. Needed.
Yeah.
Very humbling. I mean, I actually had a guy that I went to church with, who was one of probably the, can I say dickish, conversations I've ever had with somebody. And he's like, oh, I just want to be clear. I'm not buying this from you. I just had to see what this was about. And I was like, oh, cool.
Interesting.
That's kind of like a prick thing. In retrospect, it was gold.
Yeah.
I needed that, right? You need that kind of humbling, and, as a personality, challenging me like that is like, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Dude, I will go figure this out. Right. So it actually motivated me more when I got some of that pushback. And so I had to really just figure out, who do I need to talk to? Once I started getting into the right circles with people who I didn't have as much of a previous connection with, that's when things started moving.
So, I've been experiencing this myself as I shift from, corporate to my own thing. How do you, because your skills, your talents, your personality, that was all the same, right? That's still what you bring
Just
to the
about
table.
the same.
But how did you go about cultivating that new identity and building that network, right? How did you get in the right rooms?
Well, one of my very first key people was Ray Watson that I connected to.
Yeah.
And we hit it off. And for whatever reason, so my first client was in one of his CEO roundtable groups. And my first client was like, "You need to meet Ray." And so it just kind of started going from there. And Ray put me on the speaking circuit, basically. And I have always been I'm not like the world's greatest orator. I can't even say that word. but effective enough.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just tried to give as many talks on what I was doing as possible and get in front of as many people. And I realized that was probably my my path. Was I just needed more people to talk to, and doing talks was a great way for me to get efficiently in front of a captive audience. And then I just tried to be really systematic with meeting those people and following up with those people. And so pretty quickly I started getting a little steam there. Once I could get people to say, hey, you're a guy who knows something that can benefit people once you come in and give a little talk. So that was huge.
So that was kind of the start of the flywheel, if you will, right? That spin. What's the flywheel look like nowadays? Are you you got open calendar?
Not very open calendar, which is great. It actually presents different challenges, and nothing to be complained about. Is figuring out, it's more of a capacity issue.
Yeah.
But the flywheel now is part of what I learned. So I kind of didn't tell you what I learned, right? So what I learned, obviously the talks were a piece of it, but I told you I didn't know the mechanics. I had a great guy who has now become a mentor when I first started, who was basically like, look, we're going to go make friends with as many people as we possibly can. And the primary mechanism is going to be through the phone. And so we're going to call as many people as you know. And we are going to build this up through the phone. And as you give talks, we add people into the list, and now we call them. And they just bum. That is really the catalyst, right? Was this consistent cadence of calling, checking in, building relationships with people, following up, helping them, staying in touch over time. And so in the beginning, I was doing a ton of that. As I've gotten busier, as essentially that worked, and I got more and more clients, the amount of that I do is a little lower, but that is my consistent flywheel, right? So I don't do as many talks, although I enjoy doing them. I just don't have as much time. Don't do a lot of networking events. I do my client work, and I get on the phone. And when I first was taught that work, man, I was like, I don't feel like a used car salesman. I don't want to, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I went from really hating the idea of doing it. And the only thing that really motivated me was I thought about my family. I got to provide for these people. And so I'm willing to do whatever I've got to do. And so I worked through that head trash, the mindset stuff of like, am I cold calling? Am I turning into that guy? I didn't want to be that guy. To really just seeing it as the most efficient and effective way to build a lot of relationships with a lot of people. And so, man, that is really the thing that led me to my practice consistently upswing. And that's why about a year, in the past year, in addition to implementing EOS, I implement something called Outgrow, which is just that, right, at scale. So you're just getting all of your sales, customer-facing people to consistently go outbound and build, relationships with people, primarily through the phone. You consistently see 15 to 30% revenue growth, and it just works. And so I come back to my own story. And so the beauty of that work is I'm not asking people to do anything I don't currently do or haven't done before. And, went from 18,000 in company revenue in 2008 to seven-figure company revenue, So and so all of that is I really contribute to just the willingness to consistently reach out and build relationships, primarily through the phone.
Yeah.
Did it this morning. Got my calls in, man. Got my 5 calls in.
So I'm glad that you said it the way you said it, because I was hoping.
Is this a huge tangent? Are we on the right track? Okay.
No, I don't want to boast about myself on the podcast about you, but you are following all my leading questions perfectly.
Okay.
I asked you earlier about how do you raise the standard for your company, and you had a key comment just there that I'm doing the thing that I teach, right? So I wanted to bring back to you can't raise the standard if you're not willing to meet the same standard that you're expecting of your employees.
You have to be willing. Now, should a CEO of a $100 million company be actually doing what everybody else is doing? No. Should you be willing to do some of that at times? Yeah. You should be willing to do what you need to do. there's a balance there, right? Right. If we're looking to expand into 4 or 5 markets, I don't need you cleaning a truck. Nothing wrong with cleaning a truck. I don't think you should be cleaning the truck today, right? We need to figure out how to get. So I do think you need to be willing to do certain things that you're asking people to do. It just builds credibility. Like I've got a team that's starting Outgrow this week, or in like a week and a half, and the culture of the company, it's not as healthy as we need it to be. We need to get the health of the culture. There's some doubt, and I told this guy, I was like, I think it's going to be important because we're going to ask your team to do some stuff. Getting on the phone scares the living daylights out of people, right?
It does.
They want to throw up in a trash can, and I've been there. Even though what's really the worst that can happen, but that's not the point, right?
Yep.
It is a real fear that we have of rejection, and his team is nervous. And I was like, hey, it's gonna be important that you join them in the work, right? I think they've got to see that you don't have to do as much as they do, but let's get you doing some of this. And I think he's like, absolutely. I think that's going to be a key piece of me being like, I'm not asking you to do something, and this is nerve-wracking for you. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to kind of come alongside. Let me get in the trenches with you, right? So I think that's a good example. Should he be doing that all day? No. There are other things he needs to be focused on. But in this case, it will help kind of build the culture up. To meet, right, he's raising the standard, and so he's willing to do what he's asking him to do.
Yeah. So, John, as we kind of wrap up here, I have a few more questions. I want to ask you again, and it sounds like the answer is Laura, but what made you bet on yourself?
Well, I think Laura got tired of me talking about it, right? And so she's an amazing person. So she, I think, has at the right times, at various times, has just said, hey, dude, go. But I think probably personally, I mean, we all have to bet on ourselves to some degree. And I don't even, is that the right language to even use, but we all have to decide what we want out of life. Mm-hmm. And I wanted, not like a hugely driven by a lot of fancy stuff type guy. That's what I love about Laura. That's not, we have done well. If you saw where we lived, it's not that much bigger than this room, I mean, we haven't let that necessarily keep pace with what we could. So we're not driven by that, but driven by opportunities, freedom to use our time how we want to use it, freedom to do interesting things and not have a lot of worry about it, right? So we had a nice trip to New York City for Valentine's Day, and I didn't want to spare an expense, right? Let's just, if we're going to do it, let's do it. And so we did. And that is important to me, is if we're going to do stuff like that, meaningful time together, I want to be in a position where we don't have to worry about that stuff, even if we're not going to be splurging all the time. Does that make sense? So I think it's really driven by freedom. And then the more analytical side is, I think the perception is that going out on your own is necessarily riskier. And I think that very much so in certain circumstances, there is more risk, especially at the beginning. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a lot of clients or customers. But I'm not so sure that that's always accurate. And the way I like to think about it is, when you're an employee, you have one customer. Right? And so I teach all of my clients, if you have one customer, or we have two customers, that's customer concentration, and that is incredibly risky, right, in your business. And so that's very risky as a person who's taking care of their family. That's also risky. Yeah. You've got one customer, the employer, you're betting that they're going to take care of you. Well, what their job is to make decisions that's for the good of the whole company as a whole. And maybe they make good decisions, and maybe they make bad decisions. But they have at times the right and the prerogative to go, we got to do something different, and it may mean we don't need those people anymore. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It just kind of is what it is. Well, you put yourself in a risky position. You go over and you build a company that has let's say a diverse enough customer base. So I've got roughly about 30 companies that I work with. Well, nobody has 100% retention. Every company has churn. I do, we have some. And so sometimes it's not the right timing. There are various issues and people fall off. Well, if one of those falls off, I don't enjoy it. Who does?
Yeah.
Well, every once in a while I do enjoy it, depending on who the client is. But as a general rule, I don't enjoy that feeling, but I'm not going to lose sleep over that. So in my work, I get fired, but my firing is now, the risk has been decreased. And so for me, there was an analytical side of this too, where I started to go, I actually don't know that this is necessarily riskier. Do you understand?
Yeah.
The perception is that it's riskier, and there are times in which it's riskier. But I think on the whole, if you can get it to a point where there's something going, I would not want to go back to the position or be in a position where I'm worried, is my boss going to fire me? And this is the only stream of revenue I have. So that's risky. So I think there's the kind of emotional, spiritual side of it, which was drawn to being able to create. I think that creative side of me, that musician, has never gone away. I want to create. I don't know what the future looks like. I want to be a part of that creation, and I'm okay. I don't need to know everything before I take a leap. I need to just know enough. So I've always drawn, and this gives you that opportunity. And then the analytical side is really looking at what's riskier.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten to the point where I would rather, I think at this point, have that risk that's spread across multiple revenue streams than one revenue stream that says, without notice, and you've experienced this, your service is no longer needed, and that's it, no revenue. So there's kind of the heart and the mind side of how I've kind of looked at it.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
It does.
I hope so.
It does. And as we wrap up here, I want to first I don't know if I've shared this with you, but the night that you and I met, we were driving on our way to that dinner thing at church, and I turned to Taylor and I was like, you know what? I think I want to start some sort of business coaching thing. Like I don't know if I want to do this corporate sales thing for long.
Okay.
And we were in the process of selling our business, so you knew that we were kind of freeing up some time. And we sat down in that frigid, cold room, and I leaned over and I was like, what do you do for work, man? And you're like, oh, I'm a business coach. And I literally turned to Taylor, and I was like, you won't believe this.
That is cool. I did not know this.
So I think that was a lucky moment where I leaned in to not just, I think I followed up with you at the end. I was like, hey, what's your number, man? Let's get lunch, something like that.
Yeah.
For those of you for those people out there that aren't blessed to call you a friend, they're not here in Central Florida, they're not a client of yours, where do you recommend they go? Books, podcasts, things like that would help them kind of cultivate this mindset of leaning into their own gifts and talents and trying to find where that underlying metronome beat is that they need to be at.
I don't know how big your audience is at the moment.
Right now it's me and you.
We're working on it. I would say they can reach out to me. I'd love to talk to them. If there's somebody out there who sees this as like, hey, I'd love to, if this is helpful, and you may have watched this and be like, oh, that was not a good use of my time. But if it was, you can put my email, you can give my information, people can reach out. I think, so I implement EOS. EOS is founded by Gino Wickman. Gino is also working on something called eLeap.
Okay.
eLeap is, he created this whole series of toolkits for kind of the stage of entrepreneur that's helping decide, first, are you really an entrepreneur and is this a good path for you?
Ooh.
And then if you are, kind of the early stages of how to get that going prior to having something like a leadership team or a larger company. So it's really in that kind of like 1 man, 2 man, 4 or 5 people type stage. I'd highly recommend looking at that. They've got all kinds of cool resources. And his first objective is actually to help you figure out, is this a good path for you to take this leap? Or are you more called to being an entrepreneur, being entrepreneurial inside of a company? Great. There are all kinds of potential opportunities for that, and he doesn't necessarily help you down that path, but he helps you gets clarity on that. So I think that step 1 is just figuring out if it's the right path. I will say, and I don't want to be overly callous, but life is short, and if you feel like this is if you're getting a strong enough, if this will not go away in your mind, and this probably was happening with you, right? It was happening with me. It just wouldn't go away. You got to pay attention to it. And, I always try to go to the end. My wife thinks I'm morbid, right? Because I talk about death and like the end a lot. But I always go there and go, well, what would I have wanted to be proud of? Mm-hmm. And I think courage and perseverance is important to me. What was the courageous thing I felt like I needed to do at the time? And if you're just feeling like that's something that won't go away, don't be stupid, especially if you have a family. You need to take care of your family and do this other stuff. But I would pay close attention to it and know that look around, people figure it out all the time. Yeah. And you probably can too. So I think you want to have a plan, be clear on the mechanics, maybe a little more clear than I was, and go for it.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you. I think that's it, man. I guess we end this on.
I love it. Cool. All right. Thanks, man.